largest middle class in the history of the world. But the evidence now is absolutely certain that the middle class is shrinking. It started to shrink even before '07. It started to shrink in the year 2000. At that the time of the NASDAQ bubble, the jobs have not come back. And we have been in the doldrums. And now the prosperity that we have today, which is still a fair amount, is based on debt. That is the big problem. And that's why it's not so. And the productivity, the real production that made America great financially, the productivity is not here. It's overseas due to bad policies, bad monetary policy. Consuming our wealth in wars that don't need to be fought. Consumption, there's been a lot of people who have been taught over many decades that war is good for the economy. They still teach that in the schools. It's an economic myth, and they still teach, and they'll say, well, isn't that when the Depression ended? No, it wasn't. When it lowered unemployment, but you hired 10 million people and put guns in their hands, call them employed, that's hardly fruitful employment. The Depression actually ended after the war, a couple years afterwards, when all the troops came home. 10 million people came home. And the Keynesians said, oh, there's going to be another depression to come home. We have to have job programs. We have to do all these things. Because how will we ever, assimilate having so many people just coming home? They're getting out of the military. 10 million came home. And guess what they did with the budget? They cut the budget by 60%. They cut half of it by 30%. That's how the depression ended. By $1 trillion. Because if you have bureaucrats interfering with your life and interfering with the economy, that's not productive. So they take the money from the people, and that's a loss. Then they put it in the hands of a bureaucrat who interferes with your life. That's another loss. You've lost twice.
Yeah.
If you take that $1 trillion and put it back into your pocket, and you spend the money, it will be spent much more wisely. So seductive in bringing people into believing that this thing can last forever. Thomas Jefferson didn't even want the government to be able to borrow money. That would have been a good idea. Even today, we'd be forced to pay our way, whether it's the war or the welfare, on a daily basis. People would rebel because they would be infuriated on knowing how much taxes they have to pay. So, no, it's delayed. We borrow money. That means you can delay the payment, and then we print the money, and that delays the bad effects from it. But, it used to be that I said, and many people still tend to say, and they say, we can't spend this money today because we're going to give it to the next generation. Well, I've modified that a little bit. We are the next generation. They don't work real hard, but they've been living on borrowed money. They buy a house, and the house doubles in prices, so they borrow more money. Well, that's all come to an end. So when an individual does that, what does common sense tell you? Well, if they want to do it honorably, they're going to pay down their debt. They're going to get another job and live beneath their means and start spending less money, or if necessary, somebody's going to declare bankruptcy. But here, Our country gets into trouble because of too much spending, too much debt, too much borrowing, too much printing money, and too much regulation. So they say, yep, there's a crisis here. So what do? They increase the spending, increasing the debt, increasing the printing press money, increase the regulation. And they say, wonder why it's not working. So, because they do not understand, they don't have the vaguest idea of what kind of creative energy comes from people who are free. This is why freedom is so wonderful. To me, it's wonderful because I just want to be free. They want the government out of my life. You don't have to give that up. We don't even have to make that choice. That's why we should do a much better job in selling this issue of liberty. Because if you have liberty, not only do you enjoy your personal life better and you get to work for your own excellence and virtue, but you're also much richer. The richest countries in the world have always been the freest countries in the world. Society is, the more the wealth is divided unevenly. When a country destroys its currency, there's a natural tendency for the middle class to shrink and the money go to the wealthy. And just think of what's been happening to us. Not only did the wealthy benefit from the destruction of the currency, and there was a smaller group benefiting by the government program, when the crisis came, they got the bailouts and the bad debt. That can't happen in a free society, and sometimes they'll challenge you and say, oh, you want so much free enterprise that you don't want to have any regulations. I want regulations of the kind that the free market puts on you. Don't steal, don't rob, don't get benefits from the government. Guess what? They wouldn't have failed as middle-class American people. Freedom certainly would bring people together because it would not be challenging. We would all accept these liberties and accept other people's lifestyles and their religious lifestyle. That to me would be just wonderful. But freedom is not not a real old idea. People a lot of times will accuse and say, oh, you just want to go back to the dark age. They say you'd be a good candidate for the 18th century. Say, guess what's old? Tyranny is old. It's been around. The more the special interests win the game. Do you think in the Soviet system there wasn't a special class who benefited the most? There was always a neat little group that benefited the most, no matter how much. It just gets more uneven, the more tyrannical it is, and the poorer the people get. Now we are moving in that direction, but we can reverse it. And we don't even have to invent anything new. We were given the opportunity. Not a perfect document, but a darn good document. And the document, of course, that was born by the founders, would only be as good as the morality of the people. So it's up to us to decide what we want and use the document, hold the seat to the power of politicians. That's how we got into this mess. Why isn't the solution only sending people there who care about it and will obey the Constitution? One thing about the importance of individual liberty is understanding that it is truly individual. What we have drifted into in the last 100 years or 70 years or so is we have hyphenated our liberties, because we belong to a group. But liberty is not hyphenated except for one thing. Individuals have liberties, not because you belong to a group.